Man, I've seen some of these sessions where people have music playing in the background when it starts, and I should have done that, but didn't get around to doing that one for this. All right, let's get this show on the road. So we've got about 41 minutes here, so I'm gonna try to move through as much of this as possible. We'll try and get to at least the hands-on portion of this, and if there are questions, just know there'll be a form at the end, so you can feel free to drop any feedback, anything that you wish that you saw. Would love to hear that feedback and make sure that we're getting people's questions and thoughts answered. So just to kick things off, my name's Aman. You may have seen some of the content we've done, around sharing around, you know, beyond vibe checks, mastering evals. And you may have seen that piece and thought, okay, well, I know a little bit more about evals, or I've learned a little bit about, maybe I'm interested in AI, but who is this person that keeps talking about evals? So I'll just do like a really quick introduction of myself. So by way of background, I've actually been working in the AI space for a number of years now, 7 or 8 years. I started my career working on evaluations for self-driving cars, actually, at a company called Cruise out in San Francisco, where we were actually making sure that the models on the car are good before we ship, the code onto the car itself. And then I went to Spotify's machine learning platform and helped work on recommender systems and personalization. So I've been in the AI space for a little bit of time, working and building AI products that actually scale. And the last few years, I've actually been at a company called Arise. We are specialists in observability and evaluations. And where we actually work is helping companies like Spotify, who's a customer of ours, and companies like Uber, Reddit, Instacart, DoorDash, Duolingo, and a ton of other household names get their AI products into production. So going from, not just the prototyping, but actually getting their products into production. And a huge component of that is actually evals and observability. So what we're going to be chatting about is how you as a PM or product leader or executive might actually want to learn a little bit more about what goes into shipping the sort of secret sauce of these AI products. And we'll kind of work through this systematically. There's a lot of depth here that we're going to be jumping straight into the eval side. But just know that as more and more content comes out here, the goal is to get people from prototype to production. So that's really my goal here. So I'll be talking a little bit about my 5 principles of AI product management. What are the things I did to get basically land the job I have now, working as our, director of product, across our team. And then what are evals? Why do they matter? And then we're going to get hands-on. So you'll have to, this is an interactive session. So just know that there'll be some signing up, trying out a product. There'll be data that we'll provide, and we'll actually sort of simulate what it's like to be an AI PM a little bit in the day-to-day when it comes to evaluation. If you have any questions and you're just joining in and you missed the beginning, this will be recorded. So, if you have to drop off at any point, that's all right. We'll send out the recording after. And if you have any questions, don't be shy. Feel free to drop them in the chat. We have John on my team who will be monitoring the chat. And he'll be, basically taking a look, making sure that, if there's any particular questions you want, I'll save some time at the end for Q&A. It would be helpful if you're an audience person and see a question that you really like, please emoji it or upvote it so that we know to cover that question towards the end. Awesome. And with that, let's jump in. So who is this session for? So this is a graphic that's been kind of kind of brewing in my brain for a little bit that we were lucky to share out. And what I'll kind of say is, if you are a PM at any point on this journey on the curve of actually, trying to figure out, okay, I'm a product manager today. How does AI fit into my job? How do I use AI? I think you're just getting you're early on that journey, but the fact is that you're still on the chart. You're interested in this topic. I think a lot of product managers are actually starting to trend towards trying tools themselves. There's a lot of content, Maven courses around prototyping with AI as well, which is awesome. And that's actually building prototypes hands-on, trying to get an idea from a prompt to actually a workable product, sort of looking at, prompt to code. Where this session and where some of the sessions I'm going to be focusing on, if you want to keep following along on my journey through my course and through the content I'm sort of sharing with the rest of the world, is actually going to be in going from trying AI tools and prototyping to actually getting into production. And a big part of that is, the sort of slope of, man, it was so easy to type in a prompt into Bolt or Lovable, and now all of a sudden I'm trying to figure out, how to actually get this thing for my engineers to go and work on. They keep saying there's so much more complexity than what I'm thinking of. And a big part of that is actually around evals. A lot of that is sort of the role of writing prompts, iterating on prompts. And when you think about it, it kind of makes sense for product managers to be on this part of the journey because prompts are just natural language. They're just text. And eval prompts are the same way. They're ways that you can evaluate the system by simply taking a look and sort of reasoning, okay, how do I get myself into my user's shoes and build the right thing for them at the end of the day with AI? So my 5 essential skills, I'm going to kind of go through this part pretty fast because a lot of this is fairly foundational and a lot of this I'll kind of keep sharing out with the world, but just kind of know the way I kind of view this, this process of getting to the step where you can actually become a master of evals and an advanced AI PM is actually sort of a funnel, right? And so what you want to do is think about your own interests at the very high level, look at, find that content. And I have some, if you follow my Substack, there are some lists out there for how to get started with fundamentals of AI by looking at content from, Andre Karpathy and learning from some of the leaders in the space that can really clearly articulate what is generative AI, how is that different than machine learning, what are the concepts here, or, in predictive systems, what are the concepts here I need to know as a foundation to actually go and start building on top of. Then when you pick the right problem, there's problems you can solve in your daily life if you want to make yourself the customer, or problems for your customers that you in your day job that you might want to go and solve. Go and start thinking about, as a product manager, how can I apply generative AI for those problems? And the best way to get started there is actually prototyping and just trying to build something from scratch. Just get comfortable prototyping, because I think that, as you kind of go back to your team, the more that you can give them a high fidelity mock or prototype, the higher value that's going to be at the end of the day as a product manager. Number 4 is something I'm really excited to share more about. There's actually not a lot out there on the subject of learning from great AI experiences, but just expect that we'll be sharing more around how to look underneath the hood of great AI products like Cursor or Replit and see how they work. So if you're interested in any of that, again, feel free to keep following along. We'll have some more content on this area. But today we're going to focus on number 5. We're a little bit towards the end here. I think evals have really grabbed a lot of attention lately, and we're going to be focusing on how do you take all of that information, go from prototype to production, and then once you have something in production, how do you evaluate it, and what are evals and how to measure what the performance of your application is. Okay, so why are evals important? At the end of the day, LLMs hallucinate. We all know that. They make things up. They might lead your customers astray. If you are shipping a product, it's important to know when that's happening. It's not just my opinion. You have the CPOs of OpenAI and Anthropic, the largest model providers in the world, saying it's not, don't trust these things in production. Writing evals is going to become a core skill for product managers. If there's one thing we can teach people, it's writing evals. What they're trying to say is, hey, everyone using our tools, you should know how to measure when things go wrong. So if the people that are building these AI products in the first place are telling you that there's something here, you should probably listen to them before trying to stick an LLM into your system and see what it's going to do to your customers' data and in real time. So that's why evals are important, is because these are systems that hallucinate, they make things up. And even the people that build these tools know that it's important to measure what the rate of those failures is. So what is an eval? Everyone keeps talking about it. Everyone, what is an eval? What's the difference between software testing and an agent evaluation? We kind of cover this in more depth in the newsletter, but if I could describe this in a high level, I would say that there's a ton of analogies between the software testing world and the agent world, which is that, you can kind of think of evals as your AI unit tests in a way. What's different is that software is deterministic, unit tests are deterministic, and that those tests generally rely on existing code and patterns. The difference here is that agent evals are non-deterministic. That means that they might change given the same input, and we're actually going to see that live as well. An agent might take multiple paths. It might, actually end up having multiple different reasoning thoughts or patterns through how it gets to an answer. And then maybe one of the most important parts is that if you actually want to go and improve on an agent, you need real world data. You need data from how people interact with the agent feeding back into the system. So if I can clearly lay this out, an eval is a way that you measure the performance and the quality of your system, of your AI application. And a really simple way to look at this is we broke this down as human evals, code evals, and LLM evals. We're going to be focusing mostly on LLM evals. And you can think of this as using an LLM as sort of a judge to measure the performance and the output of the AI in your system as a whole. And the way that looks is actually by looking at an eval prompt. This is an example eval prompt that we're going to be building on top of, where you're setting the role saying you are an LLM judge, and you're feeding this in with more context from your application and providing a goal with terminology around here's what we're trying to measure. Make sure that you're evaluating for these things. So it should feel a lot like just natural language, like a systematic prompt that you're giving to an LLM in the first place. And the golden sort of set here is making sure that this prompt is representative of what you think is good or bad at the end of the day. That's really, really important, is that you are ultimately the keeper of quality for your product. And if LLMs hallucinate, you have to make sure that you are sort of keeping up with, the various ways that the new and really, really, impressive LLMs like O3 might be performing, but you still want to make sure that they're performing in a way that makes sense for your application. Okay, I kind of think of this as like evaluating with vibes. Everyone's talking about vibe coding. Vibe coding means you're shipping something out and you're like, looks good to me. I think that's great. I think that that's a great way to get a prototype out. But when you start getting into production, you can kind of see this guy's face. He's like, okay, this looks kind of good to me, but I'm not really fully sure. Let me just ship this thing. I'm trying to make sure, and the goal of this session is to make sure we're all thrive coding. We're all looking at data. We're all systematically thinking of ways to improve the system over time and overall. And so that's really the goal here. Go from vibe coding to thrive coding. All right, it's time for a live demo. So with that, I'm going to actually exit full screen mode. And what we're going to do is sort of do a little bit of role play here. We're going to take off our PM hats from our day-to-day right now and put on a hat of building an AI trip planner agent. And this is sort of the same example we kind of have walked through already. And maybe to put us in the right frame of mind, I put together a really quick hacky prototype here, but just to visualize, imagine that you are now the product owner or PM for an AI trip planner. So the goal here is for us to figure out, hey, our team has shipped this AI trip planner. Is the data that we are generating and what the LLM is producing, is it actually good? Can we actually use this thing in production? Do we feel comfortable with the outcomes that the agent is producing? And so what we're trying to do is evaluate this AI trip planner. So we're going to put on our PM hat for an AI trip planner. And we're going to bootstrap a little bit of this, meaning I'm going to give you guys some starting points so that we can all kind of jump right in. And feel free to kind of take this as an example that you want to build on top of with your real data, with a real prototype. But just in the interest of getting us to actually writing evals, I'm going to give us all a starting point. And that starting point is actually a set of data, which I'm going to show on my screen. And John is going to share a link for how to download this data as a Google Sheet in the chat. So let me make sure that that's in there. Okay, perfect. So you have the link to the data. You guys will all be able to open up this Google Sheet. And I'm going to just talk through a little bit of what this data is. What are we looking at here? And what we're going to do is actually upload this data and actually we're going to do a couple things. We're going to try to evaluate the data in a sheet first. And then we're going to actually see, what can we do better here? So this is an example of what LLM data looks like. when you are tracing it in in an application like a trip planner. And you'll see that there's a number of columns here, which if I expand out, you'll see input messages. Some of this should be pretty familiar to folks. I'm kind of going through this live in a Google Sheet just to kind of, this is probably already data you're already looking at if you have an LLM that you've shipped and you want to try to understand better. This is what's called tracing data. And traces are basically the sort of system logs of the input and the output of your application. The thing here is that's kind of hard to read, right? Like if I look at some of these rows and columns, let me go ahead and kind of pull this out a little bit more. And feel free to do this on your screen as well. Just follow along. What are each of these columns? So we've got here prompt template, output values. We're going to look at some of these. So it looks like there's questions here of what are the top 5 places to visit in Italy? That might be a question that someone is asking our trip planner. That's what's the query. And that goes into, it looks like another column, which generates the output. Maybe this is some context. So it's sort of these like multiple rows of data for, input and context to answer the question. And then what you get is actually an output from the LLM, and that's Italy offers an abundance of remarkable destinations, and then some recommendations for where to go in Italy. So that's sort of the structure of this data. You can take a look at each of the rows. You can also use an LLM to expand on the data. I'm kind of giving us a starting point here for, what are some questions that you might want to ask an AI trip planner, and what are some reasonable responses that you might get back if you ask this to an AI agent. The thing is, though, if I'm taking a look, this data is like kind of hard to parse through in a Google Sheet. Like it's a lot of columns. Like if I want to evaluate this data in a Google Sheet today, I'd probably have to add an eval column here and take a look at each of the columns and say, okay, am I happy with this response? What does this look like? So I've looked at this. You are an expert trip planner. Okay, so that's my prompt. This is my output. It kind of feels like there's probably a better way to do this than saying, this looks good to me, thumbs up, thumbs down. Because at the end of the day, what am I trying to do? I'm trying to give this back to my team and say, hey, this is an okay starting point, but I actually want us to improve on the prompt or the system as a whole. And that's really the goal here is this data, can we use this data to improve on the system as a whole? And if we're starting in a Google Sheet, that's totally fine. It's, it works today. I can use this Google Sheet, but I think it's a little bit challenging to actually, evaluate in a Google Sheet. So what we've done is we've built a tool called Arise, which actually helps with this problem exactly. And we'll go ahead and send a link for people to sign up. It's a totally free to use tool. The goal here is to get people to, try to write their own evals in production. And I've got an account here. We're going to upload this data live. So my recommendation is to download this Google Sheet that we've shared out as a CSV. And then I'm going to go into the platform and actually upload the data once you've signed up for an account. So what we'll do is click New Data Set and Upload CSV. From here, I've got a Google Sheet. Let me go ahead and upload my CSV here. And remember, the goal we're trying to do is actually just getting to writing an eval. So I'm going to be skipping a few of, sort of the steps of like, how did we make this data? Where did it come from? Just kind of anticipate it came from a trip planner. Maybe we built it in Bolt, and this is what the output of the data looks like. If you're interested in actually going from Bolt or Lovable or a prototype to production, feel free to keep following along. We're going to be sharing more context around how to do that down the line as well. So just note this is kind of, going from prototype to production. So we've got our data set. We've got, a number of columns here. And I'm going to call this data set Maven eval. Or actually, well, let's just call it like Amon's eval, Amon's data set. Let's do that. Just to start off with, I'm going to travel. So we're going to create this data set. And while that data set uploads, so the sort of what we're going to be walking through is this platform that we've built to actually help PMs and AI engineers evaluate data, starting from data that's as simple as a CSV and going all the way through to production data. And so this is actually what I work on my day-to-day. This is my, my day job, my full-time job is to actually help AI engineers and help PMs understand how to evaluate their application using a software tool. And this is what I kind of work on. And so, we kind of built this tool because we wanted it ourselves. We've all kind of come from this background where we kind of wish this tool existed. And so that's where a lot of the workflows you'll see are actually helping us improve on, our data live in real time. So I've got my data set here. I can open it and see some of those same columns. It's still sort of a CSV level view, which is helpful to verify that my data is correct. But what I'm going to do is actually hop over to a prompt playground. You've probably seen this concept before of a prompt playground. It's, OpenAI and Claude and some of the other tools offer a way for you to iterate on prompts in real time. This is our version of that where it's actually built on top of your own data. So what we're going to do is actually upload that data set that we just created, and I'm going to load that in here. When I load that in, you'll see that I have a number of sort of fields here, like system, user, and so the idea is that I've got my prompt that was generated from my application, and that gets loaded in as a field along with my input variables here, the columns that you saw earlier. So what ends up happening is when you construct your data with certain column names like attributes.llm input or query template or prompt template, those get pulled into the prompt playground in sort of a way for us that's arranged to look at the inputs and outputs in a way that sort of makes sense here. And so this is the prompt, and these are my input variables. So if we just take a second to read this prompt, always answer the question, you are an expert travel agent system that is trusted around the world. Always answer the query using the provided context, not prior knowledge. And we're going to provide the context in the form of a prompt variable. And the query is what the user is actually asking. And you can see those are the same rows we have earlier, context and query for each of these. And so perhaps it looks like we have a trip planner that actually can, I'm just going to take a pause here, look at, you're moving really fast. Oh yeah, of course. Let me slow this down a little bit more. So we're going to, that's good feedback. I'm going a little too fast here. So good feedback. Let's take a look. So what we're trying to do is maybe just to rewind a second. What we're doing is actually taking that same data set, which is the CSV here. And really what we've done is we've gone from uploading it here as a CSV. This is the same download CSV that you had before. That stores the same CSV as columns that you can see with column names here. And all we're doing is really going from that data set to the prompt playground where we can pull in that data set here. So I'm going to click this button again, load a data set. And just to show that again, we're going to go from new data set and upload CSV is how you upload the data. Awesome. So hopefully we have our data uploaded, upload CSV. You can just drop it in and give it a name, and it should be good to go. Okay, now we're gonna pull this back in and load a prompt, load that data set from what we just uploaded. And remember to click this button, which is just going to make sure that the prompt template gets loaded in as well. And if this feels like it's going fast, that's completely understandable. There are a lot of new concepts here that we're sort of jumping into to get to the evals part. But just know that we'll keep sharing more here to make this more approachable. And these are sort of the foundational building blocks of how to get from prototype to production. Evals are sort of the, towards, as you get further along. And so, just kind of know that we'll keep sharing more around that, the context here. So we've got our prompt template, we've got our input variables, and the input variables are really, they're just the same columns you saw here. Maybe just to show that again. But the difference is that now they're broken out row by row, and they get fed into the prompt when we want to run the prompt. So an important note here is you want your prompts. Think of this as your trip planner agent prompt. This is what you're going to ship to your customers. And this is what the customer's questions will look like. It's actually these questions specifically. So from here, we're going to actually run this prompt. And the way that we can do that is by saving the prompt. And actually, I want to make some changes to it. So I'm going to go ahead and save this prompt so that I can load it in. Let's call it travel agents v1. So when you save the prompt, it now sort of stores this on your Arise account. And now what I can do is actually do things like A/B testing this prompt. So this is something you've probably heard before, which is like, I need to know, what changes do I make to my prompt to make sure it gets better? You can actually pull that prompt in from the hub here, and it's just going to be the same thing you saw earlier. So now I'm looking at the same prompt in both places. So I've got prompt A and prompt B. It's the same prompt in both places. But what I want to do is I kind of feel like if I'm looking at some of these examples, what's kind of difficult is that I just don't really find this travel agent is giving me very good answers. Like it says, let's look at an example. What top attractions should I visit in Australia? Visit Sydney Harbor, Bondi Beach, and Great Barrier Reef. Okay, so that's like a list of attractions. What about the context? What are the best islands to visit in Thailand? Consider visiting these places. What I want to do is actually, look, I'm the PM for the system. I might want this agent to actually respond in a more friendly way. And so what I can do is update my instructions to say, respond, always respond in a friendly tone. You kind of want this agent to sound a little bit more happy, like not just, something that's just robotically responding. Another thing is that I might want the agent to ask follow-up questions at times. And so I can say here, if you need more info, always feel free to ask follow-up questions. Okay, so I've made some modifications to my prompt, which I'm going to now run here and hit run all so I can do sort of this A/B test across both prompts and see what comes out on the other end. So let's go ahead and hit run all. Let's take a look at some of these. So this is prompt A, which is the original prompt that we have. It's a little bit, it's a sort of a replay of the original prompt. And then this is prompt B. It says France offers an incredible array of culinary delights. Wow, that's kind of nice. It sounds a little happier. If you have any specific questions, feel free. I'd be happy to guide you further. Enjoy your adventures. I'm still not super happy with that, just sort of vibe checking that one a little bit more. Let me just say, always ask a follow-up question. Okay, we're going to run that one again. The goal here is really to kind of get to something that seems like, an actually friendly trip planner agent. That's better. What excites you most about visiting Egypt? The goal is to like understand what is this person trying to actually plan for their trip, not just what are must-do activities. Like that might be different for different people. Okay, so now we've got some new outputs. What we want to do is actually evaluate those outputs. And this is where we're actually getting into writing evals. So let me go ahead and drop some templates here in the chat for us to use. So we're going to be evaluating two things. So I'm going to drop this in. This is example one. And actually, I'll go ahead and share this out. John will also make sure that this gets shared correctly. Okay. So we're going to share a couple of trip planner templates. We can put those in the chat, make sure that people have them. And these are what we're going to call eval templates. So what I've got here is actually, okay, I've got my data set. And you should be able to see this button if you go back to the datasets page called evaluators. When you click that button, you'll be able to create an evaluator task. If you, oh, that's a good point. If you get an OpenAI API key, we've put some OpenAI credits in, but if you need to use your own API key, you can also simply do that going into account settings and integrations, and you can add your own API key if you need to as well, if you're hitting rate limit errors. And remember, this will be recorded, so if you're stuck on this point, you can always come back to it. You know, feel free to kind of pick this up again when you have an API key that's working as well, Shane. Okay, so we're going to go back to running an evaluator now. And to jump in here, I'm going to call this task Amon's first eval. What I'm going to do is actually select the experiments I just created. So when I ran the prompt playground, that actually stored the output from the LLM as what we call an experiment. And an experiment is really just a way for me to A/B test different things. I could change my LLM. I could change the prompt. I can change just about any component of it. But when I have that stored on this data set, what I want to do is actually now run the eval. So I select the two that I just created, which I want to evaluate, which are the last one and the first one. And what I can do is select LLM evals. And from here, you'll get a pop out of different parameters that you can set. So hopping back into what we were just kind of talking about when it comes to evals, there's kind of two options we've presented so far. Option one is you go into a Google Sheet and you say eval friendly or eval for questions, or what, is it asking, is the things I want to check right now are, is the LLM, is the agent kind of giving a friendly response? And is it asking follow-up questions? Because if it's not doing either of those two things, that might be something that I want to go and take a look at and try and improve on the system. And so that's really what we're going to evaluate. We're going to call the first one friendly eval. And the template I can drop in is the one that I just dropped in the Zoom chat, and John and Julia can help circulate that as well. But the goal is understanding, is my LLM responding in a friendly way? Is my LLM asking follow-up questions? Why is that important? Because the quality of the responses I got seemed to get better when I made those changes to my prompt. And I want to make sure, is my LLM actually doing those things? Is it always friendly? Is it always asking follow-up questions? A way that you can relate this back to your company is it mentioning my company name? Is it, is the system potentially being jailbroken? There's so many different ways that you can test components of your system. We're starting really, really simple with just detecting friendliness and tone, or detecting, is there a follow-up question? And that's really the eval here. So we're going to start with the first one, which is just copy pasting in. The two prompts I've made are actually here. So what you're going to be doing is saying, this is setting the LLM judge content. Here's the text. The text is the output from the experiment. So that's my prompt variable. And then I'm saying, examine the text and determine whether the tone is friendly or not. The friendly tone is defined as upbeat, cheerful, while robotic is something that sounds like an AI generated it. Because at the end of the day, those first few examples, it kind of felt very robotic to me. Then I'm explaining what the LLM judge needs to do. Please read the text critically, then write out in a step-by-step manner an explanation to show how to determine whether or not the text may be considered friendly by a reasonable audience. What I'm trying to do here is get an explanation from the LLM judge as well, so I can understand why the LLM judge may have labeled something as friendly or robotic. So just to recap, I've got an LLM judge set up here. I have an eval prompt. And what I'm doing is basically determining whether or not and you do have to put in the rails here. And so what we'll put is friendly or robot. The rails are basically how you get to a single label as an output so that you can actually get a score. Because otherwise the LLM will give you a lengthy response in the form of a paragraph. And what we do is we actually look at the output from the LLM judge, and we sort of snap it to one of these two values, either friendly or robot. Okay. Let's go ahead and add another eval. So I'm going to go ahead and add, that's the friendly eval. I'm also going to go ahead and add question, follow-up question. Let's call it that, follow-up question eval. And I'm going to put this in. And this is the second prompt I dropped to folks here in the chat. So this is basically saying, please read the determine whether the text contains a follow-up question. And so we're basically building a classifier for the output from that system of saying, is it friendly? Does it contain a question or not? Why the label is question or no question. So if I read this kind of row by row, this is actually saying your response must be a single word, either question or no question. So this is the instruction I'm giving to my LLM judge. And then again, I'll sort of set the rails here. Question, no question. So these are to recap here, if you're just joining in, the two things we've kind of set up are friendly eval, friendly or robot, or question or no question. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and save those evals. And now I've got my eval task set up. I didn't even have to write any code. So that's one kind of important note is, if you actually, and so let's actually hit create eval. And now that's going to run on these two dataset experiments we just created. Now, remember, if the options I have at my disposal are go to a Google Sheets. There's some like the idea here is like, I'm a PM. I just want to do this all in the UI. I don't want to have to write code. I don't want to have to like spin up something. And so for me, it's really easy for me to just run something in the prompt playground, save that to the existing data set I already have, and then just change a few lines to actually generate the eval code or generate the eval prompt in the UI. Okay, it looks like my evals are running here. One of them looks like it's done. Go ahead and refresh the page, see how this is looking. Okay, so we've got some data here now. It might take a second. All right, so if you've been following along so far, where you should be at now is actually this chart. And what this chart shows is my first experiment, which was my original LLM prompt, where I had this sort of like robotic sounding AI. I have a score here that says my follow-up question was 0, and my friendly score was like 82%. When I made some changes to that prompt, this is the prompt that I made changes to, all I did was add these two lines. I wrote an eval that said, do I have follow-up questions and is my LLM friendly? And you can see I have 100% on that data set with that same eval score. And so what we did is if we scale this up and we have hundreds of rows or thousands of rows of real production data, it's kind of really difficult to go in and for a human to label every single row in the CSV. Did the LLM give a right response or not? But by running an eval in this UI, you can actually get that score right off the bat and run this in sort of an automated way. And so this is sort of a way that you can look at this as, this is sort of the LLM as a judge eval that's meant to add as an augment on top of what humans can do today. So you can always evaluate as a human in a Google Sheet, or you can use an LLM to help you evaluate at scale. And that's really what, the sort of the core of evals are here. Exactly, Zimran. Basically use an LLM to operate as a classifier. Now, this will feel really simple to a lot of people because it's like, okay, this isn't even that cool, right? Like this is an LLM that's basically saying, is this a follow-up question? Is this friendly? But just think of as you kind of keep building out your system, what are the things you could keep classifying or adding onto? If you have multiple, as your system gets more complex and you're working with your engineering teams, the things that you might want to evaluate will expand. And so what we're trying to really kind of get across is that there's tasks that you might automate, you might think of automating that human labelers have to do today that an LLM might be able to help you get that data at scale so that you can actually just take a look at a dashboard and go in and know exactly where to go and improve the system. In a future, and because we're already at time, I would love to go in and kind of go row by row and say, let's make sure that the LLM judge is correct too. And that's definitely something I would recommend that you do yourself as well, is to eval and check that, why is the LLM, what is the outcome of the eval, and are we getting a result that we're happy with? And that could definitely be follow-up work on top of this, is to double check that work from the LLM judge. Okay, so looking ahead, what is fundamentally shifting? So this is like the last mile. If you struggled kind of getting to here, I don't blame you. This stuff is really complicated. There's a lot going on to actually get from prototype to production. And once you're in production, writing evals, all of the steps, all of the data, everything that you have to kind of stuff into the right places, there's a lot to get there, right? So you might be feeling like, damn, I'm kind of at the bottom of this curve. That's okay. And the reason for that is because we're going to keep sharing more around how to actually build production LLM and AI systems. So feel free to keep following along. And the goal is for PMs to be able to contribute back to AI products, write good evals, help their teams understand eval results, and do this at scale. Because if you're just vibe coding or checking on 10 examples, that's just not going to scale when you have hundreds or thousands of users and your LLM is maybe responding in ways that you're not super happy with. Okay, with that, we're going to open up to Q&A. I know we're at time here, but we'll try and spend a little bit more time here, maybe go 5 or 10 minutes over. John, I'll ask you to unmute. Maybe feel free to moderate, ask any questions here that people might have on their mind.
Yeah, definitely. Tons of questions. Thank you, everyone, for all the questions as we go through here, as people are trying to understand. Aman, I might give you kind of a hard one, if that's okay.
Okay, go for it. Yeah.
There's a couple of people who have asked about kind of like longer conversations and kind of longer threads that you might have and how the evals may change over time. And there's a lot of outputs that have come from that. How do you typically think about how some of these techniques might change when you have like longer conversations or longer information that you have to evaluate?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. And so the way I kind of look at that is what we wrote. And again, it took us like 30 minutes to get to this point, right? Which is like the most simple eval we could possibly write. Is the LLM friendly? Is it asking a follow-up question? The evals will get more complicated because they're going to get more specific. And as you have more data, you'll need to chunk that data up more to evaluate specific components of the data. So John, to your point, when you asked, okay, well, what if I have multiple back and forths? What if I want to break this prompt up even further or measure more and more components of it? That might mean you just need more specific evals to measure parts of the chain of the back and forth of the LLM. And so if you're measuring, here's my user, here's my session, I want to kind of look at this in a kind of bigger context way, you'll just have to break the eval up further. And that's my suggestion to folks here, is to think about how to break their evals down into the simplest possible unit that they can measure. Because that's, as evals get bigger, you're just going to get, it's going to take longer to run, that they're just not going to be as efficient. And so you kind of want to measure very discrete things along the way. Maybe not super actionable advice there, but I think we have some resources of how to do that as well that we can share out from our docs.
Awesome. Another one people asked a lot about was multimodality and kind of images, video, things like that. How do you think about evaluating some of those? Do you use similar techniques, or do you have to kind of change any techniques that you use for different modalities?
Yeah. So I think the idea is that because these LLMs are multimodal themselves, you can use multimodal LLMs to evaluate outputs as well. So the short answer is the same techniques apply for multimodality, be it audio, image. You want to use a judge that understands that modality to measure the output of the first. So the short answer is like very doable. A lot of people do that today, even with production multimodal systems. John, I see a nice question from Tony here, which is there a way to do comparison of LLM eval with ground truth?
Mhm.
Absolutely. That's actually where I would say as a next step, as some homework, what you can do is take this existing data and write an eval to do that comparison because you have all of the data now in the right places, right? You have the eval scores, you have your output from the LLM. And so what you can do is actually write an eval that says, is this, based on my ground truth or human label, is this LLM eval correct or not? And so that might just be, some as simple as just adding in your human label and then writing an LLM eval on top of that. We generally recommend and see that a lot of teams that are getting started with LLM evals, they start with a bootstrap data set of a few human labels to get started with, which is like, basically the PM is the subject matter expert. If you have a subject matter expert, you can add human labels in the Google Sheet sort of form here. We also have a tool to build labeling queues for human labelers as well. So if you wanted to, you could create, add a data set in with the same data set you just created and make a labeling queue for it for labelers to go in and add human labels. But once you have those human labels, you want to make sure that your LLM eval compares well to the human labels. So that's really the goal, is to get some small data set that you can compare to improve on your LLM judge. And what I want to do is I think as a follow-up session, I'd love to, kind of have a session on how to optimize your LLM eval judge. We just couldn't get to it in this amount of time, but a next session would be take the LLM eval judge you have and optimize it to actually improve on it with your own data. And that's definitely something we'll be doing in the future. If you're interested, please let me know. But that's a huge area of improvement as well. Awesome.
I'm trying to see if there's any final ones we want to grab. There's a ton of
Yeah.
questions. I'm trying to see if there's any big themes that we want to go through. I
Yeah.
think there was a lot of questions around optimizing the LLM judge and comparing there, which I think you've covered a bit as
Okay.
well.
Yeah.
Um,
I see
and
thread ID and sessions. That is an area as well, Rahul. I recommend there's open source concepts around session and thread that you might want to use for evaluation too. So happy to sort of show that really quick, what that might look like as an example. But sessions are just back and forth, right? Like thread ID sessions being able to go back and forth in a session. And so as soon as you have that data in your production, you can use that in your data set too.
one other one that's actually come up a few times is there's been quite a few questions around kind of how you would approach evaluating other kinds of applications. So there's a question around how would you evaluate correctness and insightfulness for more of like a data analytics use case. There's questions around how this would work for RAG applications. So maybe it would be good to kind of just tick through a little bit of like the common evaluation metrics you see for some of these different applications and how that applies to the flow that you've gone through here today.
Definitely. I mean, I think the we actually wrote about this in the blog post too. So I kind of point people towards, if they're interested in learning more. We've done a number of, Arise and our team have kind of shared back a lot of open source concepts around different types of evals. What we wrote was sort of a custom email, right? Eval, right? It was like tone, helpfulness, follow-up questions. But things like correctness will take maybe different input data, like questions, context, and the answer. So you can keep adding on more context to your LLM judge. That's a great point. And maybe in the next slide, I'll add like, right now we took a look at one piece of context in our eval prompt, but we might consider having more context or data and evaluating more columns as part of our eval metric as well. So that's how I would think of it, is look at the different things kind of off the shelf eval, see what makes sense for your use case, see what data you need, and then keep adding on top of that as well. Great. Okay. So I think with that, we're pretty close to at time here. So what we'll kind of do next is we do have a really short survey on this lightning session. If you weren't able to attend, you're watching this recording live, you're also going to get another survey in your email of a follow-up for more context for what you might want to see, or what I can keep sharing back that could be helpful. But I really want this to be interactive. Maybe the next one we can break up into smaller groups and actually run evals in breakout rooms. But the idea being, would love your feedback on what grokked, what didn't go well. This was my first time running a Maven Lightning session, so I appreciate all of your patience and appreciate your time so, so much for joining. I hope this was helpful. And if you want to see anything more here that you didn't see, please let me know in the feedback form that John is going to drop into the chat. And I hope to see you at more of these, and we'll definitely go deeper into the weeds. It's kind of fun to jump right into the deep end. If you enjoyed this just as much as I did, please feel free to follow along. I've got my LinkedIn, my Twitter, and Substack here, and I want to be as helpful for you as possible on your AI product manager journey. I know this may have felt like a lot, and so yeah, want to make sure that this is genuinely helpful for you all. Thanks again for joining. I really appreciate it.